What if the person that's driving you crazy is your own child, teenager, adult child? What if their choices are hurting your grandchildren? What if they're just doing really poor choices, stupid things, sorry, it is, that will cause their life to go down a road that you never wanted for them? Does this apply? And how does your behavior and your choices play into this? I can tell you this, it's huge. In fact, I would say this, if you don't understand how you might be enabling their behavior, you could actually drag out the amount of time that your child is going to have to experience beating their head up against a rock until they finally wake up and realize that they got to stop. They got to move in a different direction. So what I see a lot of the time is because of your love, you as a parent don't want your child to hurt. You want to stop their pain. That's what you've always done from the time they were little. That was the right thing to do when they were small. But there comes a point when they have taken control of their life. And can I tell you, there's no magic number. I'd like to be able to say it's 18, but it isn't. For some kids, it's 13. Because there are some children that you have instilled the best you knew how, right and wrong, you've given them love, you've done the best you know how, but by the time their hormones kick in, when they're 13, 14 years old, they start making their own choices. And 18 doesn't have anything to do with it because they're already doing that. Whether or not you told them they could, doesn't matter. They have taken the reins of their life. So I say those principles begin to apply at that moment. When that happens, you see them making poor choices, not once, not even twice, but once the third time happens and they continue to make the same poor choices, that establishes a pattern. Okay? 3 or more times establishes a pattern. In this case, it's a pattern of some destructive, dysfunctional behavior. It could be something like using drugs or drinking. So it could be in that area of addiction. It could be the choices of the people they're attracted to. They keep being attracted romantically to people who will not treat them right. If it's a girl, she may find herself in a relationship with a guy who disrespects her, even verbally or even physically abuses her. She might get involved with somebody who doesn't treat her like she deserves to be treated. They're unfaithful. They have affairs. They sneak behind her back and break her heart. But she continues to be attracted to people who have major character defects. You have a child who's in a dysfunctional behavior pattern, and now you're sitting at a crossroads. You have 2 choices. You can do what most people do because they don't understand the concept I'm trying to explain to you. They don't want their child to hurt, so they continually bail them out, rescue them. They talk to them. They give them coaching. Well, honey, if you only understood, if you would do this and stop doing this, your life would get better. And so they're constantly using their words and sometimes their pocketbook to try to get their loved one to do the right thing. Why isn't that a good idea? Sounds like a good idea because it doesn't work. Because that's not what changes. Once you're into this unhealthy pattern of behavior, whichever one it is, you have to experience painful consequences. It's that Galatians 6 principle. Whatever a person sows, that they will reap. I would say this, that they have to reap. They must reap it. And if you stop them from reaping, if you pay their rent, if you pay their car payment, if you bail them out of jail, if you keep rescuing them, you're going to extend the amount of time that they have to experience bad choices and consequences because you didn't let them feel the consequences. So you've heard it in, when we're talking about alcoholism, you've heard of people say, who got sober, they said, I had to hit bottom. Haven't you heard that? So sometimes our loved ones have to hit bottom before they suddenly come to their senses. And that's what has to happen. You know what's funny? It just occurred to me. There is a parable in the Bible that Jesus told called the prodigal son. And they actually, in the prodigal story, the father says, when his son came to his senses, he turned around and went back to his father because he realized that he had spent all he had on wine and women and playing. His inheritance was spent. But you know what's interesting? The father, the dad in that situation, never rescued his son. He didn't say, oh, son, don't waste your inheritance. Don't do the stupid things you're doing. He let him go. He let him go. And when he was in a hog pen eating hog slop, that boy said, what on earth am I doing? He came to his senses. So the father in the prodigal son story refused to make the codependent choice. He allowed his son to feel the pain of his choices, and that caused the son to come to his senses. And you know what? That's exactly what God does with us. God loves us more than we love our kids, doesn't he? But isn't it interesting that even though he loves us, he refuses to jump in when we're making foolish, sometimes honestly stupid choices. He lets us go down that road. He's given us free will. However long it takes is up to us, but God will not intervene. So he lets us go down that rebellious path until we come to our senses, and that's exactly the pattern, the example that you need to follow when you have a teen or an adult child that's making lousy choices. You love them so much that you want their ultimate good, not their instant good, not today's happiness. So you're going to let them feel pain today because you love them. And people around you may argue with that. You may have a even more codependent relative that has that tender heart, but you got to say, because I love them, I am not going to rescue them anymore. And you know what? At that moment, you put them in the best possible situation for them to get the help they need. I've been giving you advice about allowing your adult child to suffer the consequences of their own choices. But sometimes the painful consequences involve our grandchildren. And then things get really complicated. What if you're seeing your grandkids get hurt? When do you step in? And this is something that I need to make sure you understand. There is a point. If your grandchildren are being harmed to the point of abuse or severe neglect, let me give you a couple examples. If they are being harmed physically, say by a boyfriend of your adult daughter, a spouse, a step-parent, anyone that your loved one's choices has brought into their life, and they're being harmed physically, sexually, or emotionally, I believe you must step in. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of daily things that could happen that would be unpleasant. It's not pleasant when your mom doesn't have time for you. But we're not talking about just those kinds of daily choices. We're talking about abuse and neglect. So if the child is not receiving their physical needs and their basic emotional needs, or if they're being abused, I believe it is your moral obligation to step in. So when I say that you sometimes do need to step in, what do I mean? If the situation has gotten that bad, I believe it is our moral obligation as grandparents to either call Children's Services and involve them. You can do that anonymously, or there are times that we can intervene ourselves in love, saying this is not acceptable, and either you're going to need to make changes in your life situation that will protect your child, or I will either have the child come live with me or call Children's Services. But intervention is necessary in one way or another. I think wisdom is required to know, are you best off to take the legal way, calling CPS, and not personally making that intervention? Or if the relationship can bear it, you know what I mean by that? If your adult child will be willing to listen to you and they're open to what you may say about the need to stop the situation right now today, then you can go down that route.